Hey everybody, I'm Scott Wikle. You're listening to My Kind of Country. Thanks for joining us on a Monday night. My very special guest has worn just about every hat that there is in country music. He's been on stage, he's been on television, he's performed all over the world with Kitty Wells, Johnny Wright, Freddie, Hart, so many great artists. He is a songwriter, a singer, a music producer, radio DJ. Like I said, he's done it all, and it's a pleasure to have him on the show. He's going to tell us about his career and share some great stories with us tonight. It's my pleasure to welcome Keith Bradford to My Kind of Country. Keith, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing fabulous, and I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to be on your show, because I know that you have a massive audience, and this means a lot to me.
Well, it's an honor to have you, and I know that you have a pretty massive audience yourself with your radio station.
Well, you know, NBRN is coming up on its 17th year in business. The National Broadcasting Radio Network is celebrating its 17th year this year, so we've been around a little while.
Well, I guess so. That's pretty incredible. What first got you into radio?
Actually, I used to make believe I was a DJ. As a kid, I had a record player, and my favorite records that, of course, included Elvis and the Beatles. And I would make believe I was a disc jockey. I always knew I wanted to be one. I just didn't know that someday I'd own my own radio station.
Well, that's pretty incredible. So that's 17 years. That is pretty amazing. You guys broadcast like we do all over the world, right?
Yes, NBRNonline.com, of course, is a internet radio station, and I can remember not that long ago when somebody would say to me, oh, that's all you are, is just an internet radio station? Well, nowadays, it's been reversed, and you talk to someone who's at a radio station, you say, well, you're not on the internet? What do you mean? You're a radio station that's not on the internet? Well, that don't count.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Times have definitely changed, and it's amazing, when we sit here and do these shows out of our studios, and you've got people in Australia listening, or Norway, or it's just amazing.
One of the things that intrigues me so much about internet radio is people listen to your program at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, wherever they're at. And at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm here to tell you, Scott, I'm in bed sawing logs. I'm not listening to internet radio.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, we repeat our show overnight too, but we catch a lot of the overseas market that, they're going to bed when we're going on the air, and by the time we're in bed, then they're up and listening. So I guess it works both ways,
Right. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with how I got started here in Nashville, or do you want to go beyond, ahead of that, or before that?
Well,
where do you want me to start, and I'll start?
We can go any direction we got. How about you tell me how you got involved into the music business?
How I got involved in the music business was one of my brothers, Richard, took banjo lessons from a guy back home, our native state of Rhode Island, and at the same time that he was taking banjo lessons, my mom, her parents, and my dad's parents are from Canada, and they liked polkas and stuff like that, so at 8 years old, they had me taking accordion lessons. Well, my kid brother playing the banjo was going out on the weekends playing at bluegrass festivals while I was staying home because there was no place for an 8-year-old accordion player. So I said to my parents, if you're going to spend money on music lessons, I want either a guitar or a bass or something, but I'm getting rid of this accordion. And before I got rid of the accordion, I have to tell you this. On the weekends, my grandparents, like I said, they were French-Canadian, and they loved to dance the polkas. And they would have all their brothers and sisters over, which, of course, was all my aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews and cousins. And they would have me stand there and play my accordion, and they would throw nickels at me. And I was 8 years old, and I would gather up all them nickels. Sometimes it was $2 or $3.
Wow.
for just standing there playing my accordion. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be in the music business.
That gave you the bug, huh?
That's where it all started, on those accordion lessons.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So you, I know you were involved for several years at the Country Music USA at Opryland, and you performed shows there. I know you worked with Porter Wagner and just bunches of them there. Tell me a little bit about those grand days. I miss Opryland, by the way. It's just not the same anymore when you drive by there.
No, you can't tell me that a shopping mall took its place. You can't tell me that a shopping mall has more appeal than an amusement park.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? Yeah, the Country Music USA show was 77, 78, 79, and 80. And some of my impersonations in the show was Roy Acuff, A.P. Carter from the Carter family, Merle Haggard, Lester Flatt from Flatt and Scruggs, and Ernest Tubb, of course, my hero. And our first show was at 11 a.m. We did 4 shows a day, and my first show every day was at 11 a.m., and I got out there with a fiddle and a bow in one hand, a yo-yo in the other hand, and I'm out there singing Wabash Cannonball, sounding as close to Roy Acuff as I possibly can. And I look out, and sitting on the front row is Roy Acuff with a Coca-Cola and a box of popcorn, watching me imitate him.
No kidding.
So at the end of the show, he come backstage and introduced himself to me as if I needed to be introduced to who Roy Acuff was. Come on, the king of country music, major shareholder of the Grand Ole Opry. Are you kidding? You think I didn't know who Roy Acuff was? He says to me, you have watched and you have listened very, very, very closely to me, young man, because of all the people that I've ever seen imitate me, you are the closest to looking and sounding and acting with all your mannerisms and everything on stage. He says, you got me down pat. He says, I've never seen anyone do me any closer than what you're doing me. And he says, as a matter of fact, how would you like to be my guest on the Opry?
Wow.
I said, is this a joke? He said, no. He says, be at my dressing room number 1, be there at 7 o'clock. I was there at 6. He was the first one to put me on the Grand Ole Opry. I've got a picture hanging in my office of him and me standing there, right there at the microphone with the WSM Grand Ole Opry logo on the mic stand.
Wow.
He was the very first one to put me on the Opry.
So what was the song you sang on the Opry the first time?
Silver Wings.
Oh, perfect. That's great. Wow, that's impressive. That's really impressive. You can't get any more high praise than that. That's amazing. I know you had some charted records during that time too.
I had 2 chart records. Lonely People was the first chart record in Billboard, and the second one was written by Porter, but that was not the only one he ever wrote that I recorded. But the second one was called Lonely Coming Down, and later Dolly covered it.
That's great. I know I've seen a video of you doing Let Your Love Light Shine on Me on the Porter Wagner show.
That never charted. That particular one never charted because by then I had already been dropped by the record label, and it would have meant me having to finance the whole thing myself to get it, buy ads in Billboard magazine and all the other things that you have to do to play the music game. So that one never even got released to radio. But because I was doing the Porter Wagner show at that same timeline that I recorded that song, I decided of all the songs I can sing on the show, I might as well sing one of Porter's.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he liked that.
Great. Well, you worked for some years for the Queen of Country Music, Miss Kitty Wells. 16 years, I believe, right?
It was 16 16 years altogether, and it was an experience that I like to share with people when they ask me, what was it like traveling around the world in a bus with Kitty Wells? And I always give them the same answer, and it's been the same answer on interview after interview after interview. And it was simply this. It was like traveling around the world with your grandmother. There was no cussing, no smoking, no drinking, and most of the time she sat there while we were all staring out the windshield. She sat there either playing solitaire or reading her Bible.
Wow.
So it was just like traveling around the world with your grandmother. And the funny part about the whole thing, Scott, is when I was still back in Rhode Island with my little band, my brother, one of our girl classmates and myself, and another boy classmate on the drums, when we were still back there, I went to a place called Jack Ritchie's Sports Arena in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, to go see the Queen of Country Music. They were coming through. They were playing Boston, and they were playing Indian Ranch in Webster, Massachusetts. Webster, Mass. And they came through to North Attleboro, and they were at Jack Ritchie Sports Arena on a Friday night. And me and the rest of the band borrowed my father's van, and we went to see the Queen of Country Music, because I was always a Kitty Wells fan. I've been a Kitty Wells fan my whole life. Mm-hmm. When we left that night, I can remember it very clearly because I was only 16 years old. I had just gotten my driver's license. I was the oldest one in the band. And when we were going home that night, I said, you mark my words, one of these days, I'm going to play bass for that woman. I'm going to be in her band, and I'm going to tour with her. And they laughed so hard. The whole van was shaking back and forth. I thought I was going to run off into a ditch. They just laughed and thought that was absolutely hilarious, that I had it set in my mind that one day I was going to be the bass player for Kitty Wells. And 30 years later, I was.
Wow. How did that come about for you?
The bass player that was with Kitty right before I took the job got an artist development deal at RCA Records. And he went into Johnny's office, Wright's Enterprises, here on Old Hickory Boulevard in Madison, Tennessee, where they lived. He went in there on a Friday afternoon after signing his artist development contract with RCA Records, and he said, Mr. John, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to leave. I can no longer work for you. I'm under contract to RCA Records. And he said, well, you know, we're playing the State Fair in North Dakota tomorrow afternoon. He said, I'm sorry, Johnny, I really am. He says, I don't blame you if you never forgive me, but I'm under contract, and I can no longer work for another company. I'm under contract to RCA. So Johnny called his booking agent, who was Roy Tessier at the time, and Roy Tessier's wife, Florence, to show you how far, they're from Rhode Island also, but they were here in Nashville. They had already set up shop, Tessier Marsh Talent Agency here in Nashville. And Johnny called and said, I just got a bass player that quit. You know a bass player that can get on the bus and go with us to North Dakota to play the State Fair? He says, I don't really know anybody. And Florence butted in and said, well, why don't you give the job to Keith? You know, Keith knows all her songs by heart. He could do it. So he said, well, I got a guy I think that'll work out good for you. Johnny said, send him down. So I went down to the office. He said, we're leaving at midnight. He said, take this tape home with you. This is the whole show. All of Kitty's songs, all of the Johnny and Jack songs, the Bobby Wright songs. the songs the Tennessee Mountain Boys do. Take this tape home with you and listen to it. And take it with you on the bus and listen to it all the way out to North Dakota. And I said, I'll do that for you, Johnny. I have no problem doing whatever you ask me to do. But I don't have to listen to the tape. I already know all the songs, and I know what key she does the songs in. And I did. I knew every damn song on that show.
Wow. So off you went.
And stayed for 16 years.
Wow. And you became, you were the band leader and the MC, too, for the Tennessee Mountain Boys, right?
Yes, I was the front man. In other words, if you went to go see the Kitty Wells show, you got to see me for the first 15 minutes, whether you wanted to or not.
That's great. You know, that brings up an interesting question. Obviously, Kitty Wells was, you know, as country can possibly be. And during the time when there was so much transition starting to happen with country music, you know, with the urban cowboy phase and all that stuff coming in, what were audiences like at that time, and what was her reception? Because I know she certainly never changed her style.
We never changed a song in the entire 16 years, because the fans that came to see her, they wanted to hear the number ones. It was okay if she sang a number 2 or one that went to number 10 or one that went to number 8. It was okay. But they wanted to hear the number ones. It's just like the Haggard fans. The Haggard fans that went to see Haggard, they didn't want him singing the B-side of the record. They wanted to hear all the hits. So we could never change any songs. You know, she had 23 number 1 records and 58 albums. So, you know, your question, I'm not trying to evade the question. The question is kind of gray. The answer is a little bit gray because you're asking how were the audiences. We were in venues where the audiences were fantastic, but we were not in mainstream coliseums either. We were not in what they would call, if there's such a thing as the A team, the B team, the C team, we were not the A team at that point of her career.
Well, she certainly is a country music treasure and remains to this day. It's her music will live on forever. There's no doubt about it.
I'll tell you a quick story about Kitty and how humble she was. And if this doesn't, first of all, she never had a maid. She did her own washing and ironing and cleaning. There was no maid. Like these big stars has a maid and a butler and everything else. But no, there was no maid. Kitty Wells ran that house her own self. She didn't need any help as a maid. But I'll tell you a quick story to summarize the Kitty Wells saga of just how humble the woman really and truly was. Well, first of all, she never viewed herself as a star. She never, ever, ever came to grips with the fact that she was a world-famous star. And we were over in Germany on a tour, and on that tour was Dottie West, Dwight Yoakam, and a guy named Dave Dudley. You remember him, 6 Days on the Road?
You bet.
Okay. Well, we were in a big, giant hockey rink over in Germany, and she was pacing back and forth in the dressing room. It wasn't our turn to go on yet. And she was just a pacing back and forth. And I said, "What's wrong with you?" She said, "Oh, nothing." I said, "Well, the way you're pacing back and forth, you're going to wear this carpet out before it's our turn to go out there and sing." I said, "I'll bet you it's another one of your migraines, isn't it?" She said, No, not tonight. I don't have one tonight." I said, "Well, Kitty, what's wrong? Just, something's bothering you. What's wrong?" And she looked at me right square in the eyes and she said, "Do you think they'll know my songs?" I said, Kitty, it's standing room only out there. And not only did they know your songs, and not only did they pay $25 to get in here tonight to see you, they'll probably sing every song along with you. She was afraid they weren't going to know her songs.
Wow. That's amazing. You know, I think a lot of artists from that time period were kind of the same way. They never forgot where they came from. They never forgot their fans. And they always were very appreciative by any adulation that they received in their careers. And I think that's missing in a lot of artists nowadays, I think.
She would never, ever, ever stop signing autographs, no matter what the conditions were. Hot, cold, rain, sleet, snow, it didn't matter. She would never quit signing autographs until the very last person in line got their autograph.
That's great. Well, another gentleman that was very much the same way, and this is how you and I met a few years ago in Nashville. You were Freddie was in recording at Hilltop Studio, and you came in to visit with him and do an interview with him. The great Freddie Hart, and you were a heartbeat with him for some time.
Yes, and I want to tell you something about those years, Scott. Those years are very, very convoluted because there was 3 different things going on all at the same time. I had just this is an era where some of the Grand Ole Opry stars were downsizing and getting rid of their buses, and some of them, like Jan Howard, Billy Walker, various ones, Sheb Woolley, Penny DeHaven, they were not only selling their buses, but they were getting rid of their bands and working a single and using what we nicknamed Rent-A-Band. And I teamed up with this fella, and we created a 5-piece band, and we called ourselves Quick Change. And we would go out on the road, and Quick Change would be Billy Walker and the Tennessee Walkers. Or we would be Jan Howard and Bad Seed. Or depending on what the artist was originally called, we would be that band. We had work tapes and chord charts, and we memorized their set, and we became a Rent-A-Band. And this is all at the same time I was still working with Freddie, because Freddie's dates had dwindled down to 1 or 2 a month at that point in his career. And I was married with 3 children, and I couldn't live on 1 or 2 dates a month. So we were supplementing it with our little Rent-A-Band. So it's really, really vague, those years, when I was one of the heartbeats, because I was doing 3 different things all at the same time just to make a living in the music business, because I had never worked in a factory, and I had made a living since I was 16 years old in the music business, and I wasn't about to give it up. So we had to get creative in order to keep food on the table.
Sure. Well, I don't think it's changed very much. It's still kind of that way.
Well, I would be, if I was still trying to make a living in the music business, I would doubt nowadays if you even get 1 or 2 days a month.
Yeah.
I don't see any of my friends working.
No, well, especially right now with all the virus stuff going on, that's pretty well shut down the entertainment business, you know.
It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And I don't see it getting any better.
I don't know. It's very uncertain times, no doubt about it. But anyway, tell me some more about Freddie. I know you and he were close, and you wrote some songs together and spent a lot of time together.
We did, Freddie. Let's just say he didn't have a lot of education. He would come and pull the curtain back on my bunk, and he say, are you awake? I said, I am now. And what he wanted somebody with a paper and a pencil to write down. He was up, just him and the bus driver. He was up with his guitar writing another song, and he was getting tired, and he wanted to go to bed, but he wanted somebody to write it down for him, the words, of course. And on many occasions, I sat up all night with a tablet and a pencil, writing down lyrics as he came up with them, because he could come up with a song quicker than who'd have thought it.
Yeah.
And you know, all of his songs, of course he's no longer with us, but all of his songs were in his head. Mm-hmm. They weren't on paper. They were in his head. And unless somebody wrote them down for archive purposes, I guess Easy Lovin' would still not be on a piece of paper, because it was in his head, not on a tablet.
He had a tremendous
and he certainly didn't know how to work a computer.
Mm-hmm. He sure had a great memory, though. Boy, I'll tell you, that never turned off for him. And in the times I got to spend with him the last few years, he was always, like you said, he was always writing something. He was always thinking music, and he would always talk about music, always talk about songs, and it was just amazing. He was so, he remained so very productive, even right up into the last months of his life.
I think some of his greatest stuff that he wrote when I was with him has never been recorded.
Yeah, there's a bunch. Yeah.
There's a bunch of songs that he wrote during my little tenure as a Heartbeat that I have never found on a record anywhere. I don't think they were ever recorded.
Yeah, he's got a bunch. I know he shared a bunch with me that had never been recorded, and he had demos for some of them, and his wife had written or had typed some of them out for him and stuff like that. But yeah, he had an amazing catalog. Not only what he did record, but what he didn't record. You're right about that.
I was talking with Don Chappell one time about that very same subject. If you're not familiar with the name Don Chappell, he was married to Tammy Wynette. When Tammy came to town as a hairdresser from Alabama, Virginia Wynette Pugh was her name, she met and married Don Chappell. And Don Chappell was in my office. Of course, he's no longer with us either. But he said, what's your favorite Tammy Wynette song? I said, well, without a doubt, Stand By Your Man. He said, what about if I told you there was at least 50 more that strong, if not stronger, that the world has never heard? I said, Don, what in the world are you talking about? He said, there's at least 50 recordings by Tammy Wynette that has never been released. Wouldn't that be a treasure to be able to hear those?
Sure would, no doubt about that. Well, Keith, in all of your years, like I said, you've done so many different things. What are some things that really stand out as kind of aha moments for you? I know you mentioned obviously the Roy Acuff thing. That had to be a huge moment for you. But what are some other things that really stand out in your memory as favorite things that have happened to you?
Well, first of all, I love the question. That's a very, very, very good question. The problem is there's been so many fascinating things that have happened. The number one premier would have to be standing on that circle on the Grand Ole Opry. Where Patsy Cline and Hank Williams and the best of the best of the best stood on that circle and sang, and I stood on that circle as Roy Acuff's guest, not just once, but many, many, many Opry appearances. But that very first time, that's got to be the most memorable, the most memorable. Some of the other things, my first chart record in Billboard magazine. To think that a little kid that started out with accordion lessons at 8 years old ended up as a country singer with a chart record in Billboard magazine, the top 100 country chart at the time, and you know, meeting people like George Jones and working the Parade of Pennies, which was renamed to Toys for Tots with Barbara Mandrell, and those are all memories that I'll take to my grave, and they don't mean anything to anyone else but me, but they're treasures to me.
Well, that's a good answer. I think that's the best thing you can take away is the wonderful experiences you get to have. And there's some fantastic people in country music, and I know you've been around a lot of them.
Yeah, I have. I would dare say that there isn't a country music star of the 70s, 80s, 90s, 60s, 50s that I haven't met or actually haven't been on a package show with them, because what they would do back in those days, Scott, they would put us on these things called package shows. They wouldn't stick one artist out there on the road by themselves on a tour. They would have 4, 5, 6 of us traveling together as a Grand Ole Opry package show. And you know, we traveled with Minnie Pearl and just different ones that you don't think of anymore.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, your radio show is nbrnonline.com. We're going to put that information on our Facebook page. It's called You Gotta Love It Radio Show. And you're on, I believe, every day from 9 to 10 Central Time. Is that right?
Yes, Monday through Friday, 9 to 10 Central.
Well, great. I hope folks tune into that. I know you work with a lot of great independent artists. Of course, Dave Cayley is one of those that we've had on our show, and some great artists that you've been working with and carrying on the torch.
Yes, I've been very fortunate to have them contact me and more or less pick my brain, for lack of another way to say it. We sit down for hours and talk about what they can do to help themselves. And 9 times out of 10, when I do that, I don't charge them a penny. I just do it because I know that nobody would help me. When I needed help, I had to do it on my own, so I'm just paying it forward.
That's great. That's the way to be, no doubt about it. Well, we are going to play some of your music for our listeners right now, and we're also going to play some of these great artists that we talked about, including Kitty Wells and Freddie Hart. And Keith, I want to thank you very much for taking time to be on My Kind of Country today.
Well, thank you. I didn't expect to be able to get this much airtime, but I'm happy for it.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and anytime you want to come back, I'd love to talk to you more, as I know you got a lot of great stories you could share.
Thank you so much, Scott.
All right, that is Keith Bradford, folks, and we're going to play some of this great music for you right now as we continue with My Kind of Country. It's Fish Creek Radio.